You've probably seen it before. A detective walks into a crime scene, barely looks around, picks up a single strand of hair or a tiny trace of evidence, and within minutes, a computer screen flashes back a full identity. A name, a face, even an address. Case closed before the story even begins. That version of crime investigation is everywhere in television and movies, but it's not how real forensic work functions. In fact, the difference is so significant that it has shaped public expectations of law enforcement in a way professionals often refer to as the CSI effect. This term describes how dramatized portrayals of forensic science have distorted the public's understanding of how evidence is actually collected, analyzed, and used in real investigations in courts. In reality, there is no single moment where everything clicks into place. There is no instant confirmation, no immediate identification, and no system that produces answers on demand. Instead, real investigations are built on layers of work carried out by multiple specialists over extended periods of time. What makes this gap between fiction and reality important is not just accuracy, but expectation. When people only see the simplified version of investigations, they can misunderstand how long cases truly take, how evidence is interpreted, and what science can realistically prove on its own. To understand what actually happens behind the scenes, we need to break down the most common myths about crime investigations, starting with how crime scenes are processed in the real world compared to what is shown on screen. One of the most common portrayals in crime shows is the idea that a crime scene can be processed quickly, almost in real time, by a small group of highly skilled investigators. A team arrives, scans the room with advanced tools, identifies a key piece of evidence, and the case immediately begins to unravel. In reality, processing a crime scene is a slow and highly structured procedure that can take hours, days, or even longer, depending on the complexity of the case, even something relatively straightforward, like a property crime, requires careful documentation, systematic searching, and strict control over every movement inside the area. Crime scene work is not handled by a single all-in-one investigator. It is a coordinated effort involving multiple roles. First responders secure the area and prevent contamination. Detectives focus on the broader investigation and direction of the case. Crime scene technicians are responsible for collecting, labeling, and preserving physical evidence. In more complex cases, specialists such as forensic pathologists or fingerprint analysts may also become involved. Another major difference from fiction is how limited resources shape real investigations. Not every case receives the same level of forensic processing. Violent crimes are prioritized, while lower-level property offenses may only receive minimal examination, depending on available manpower and time. This prioritization is a practical necessity, not a narrative choice. Inside the crime scene itself, investigators follow strict procedures designed to preserve integrity. They move in controlled patterns, document every action, and avoid unnecessary contact with surfaces or objects. Even small disturbances can affect later analysis, which is why precision is essential at every step. It is also important to understand that crime scene investigators are not responsible for the entire case. They do not typically interview suspects, chase leads, or make arrests. Their role is focused strictly on the physical environment, recording it, preserving it, and ensuring that any evidence collected can withstand scientific and legal scrutiny later on. By the time a scene is fully processed, it has not been solved in any dramatic sense. Instead, it has been carefully transformed into documented information and collected materials that will move forward into analysis. The work is methodical, divided, and far slower than popular media suggests, but it is this structure that ensures evidence remains reliable. In many crime dramas, DNA evidence works like a magic shortcut. A sample is collected, placed into a machine, and within moments, a perfect match appears on a screen with a full identity attached. It feels fast, flawless, and absolute. Real DNA analysis is far more complex, slower, and less definitive than that. When a biological sample arrives at a forensic lab, it goes through multiple stages of preparation before it can even be analyzed. Technicians first have to isolate usable genetic material, which is not always straightforward. Samples can be degraded by time, heat, moisture, or environmental exposure, and in many cases, the DNA is incomplete or partially damaged. Even under ideal conditions, results are not immediate. Depending on workload and case priority, forensic DNA testing can take days or weeks. In many jurisdictions, backlogs mean that certain samples may take months before they are fully processed and reported. Another major misconception is that DNA always provides a direct answer. In reality, forensic reports usually present probability-based conclusions, not absolute identification. A result might state that a sample matches a person with extremely high statistical certainty, but it is still expressed in terms of likelihood, not certainty. Complications also arise when samples contain mixtures of DNA from multiple individuals. In those cases, separating and interpreting each contributor becomes significantly more difficult and requires careful analysis to avoid incorrect conclusions. There is also a widespread misunderstanding about DNA databases. Law enforcement systems such as CODIS do not contain genetic profiles of the entire population. Instead, they primarily include profiles from convicted offenders, and in some regions, individuals who have been arrested or charged. This means most DNA matches are not instant identifications, but comparisons against a limited database. In recent years, genetic genealogy has added a new dimension to investigations by linking crime scene DNA to relatives found in publicly available ancestry databases. While this method has helped solve cold cases, it is not a simple search function. It requires extensive family tree reconstruction and careful verification. And it is also subject to evolving legal restrictions in different regions. Ultimately, DNA is one of the most powerful tools in forensic science, but it is not a standalone answer. It is one piece of evidence that must be interpreted within a larger investigative context, alongside other findings and corroborating information. In movies and TV shows, fingerprints are often treated like instant proof of identity. A technician lifts a perfect print from a surface, runs it through a system, and within seconds, the exact person appears on screen. It is presented as absolute certainty, a kind of forensic signature that never lies. The real process is far more complicated and far less definitive. Most fingerprints found at crime scenes are not clean or complete. These are known as latent prints, and they are often partial, smudged, or distorted depending on the surface they were left on and how long they have been exposed to environmental conditions. This alone makes comparison much more difficult than it appears in fiction. Even when a usable print is recovered, the matching process is not fully automated or universally standardized. Automated systems, like fingerprint databases, can suggest possible matches, but they do not make final identifications. Instead, they generate a short list that must be reviewed by trained examiners. The actual comparison process involves expert judgment. Analysts look for specific ridge patterns and points of similarity between prints, but there is no single global rule that defines exactly how many matching points are required for a conclusive identification. This means conclusions rely on professional interpretation, which introduces a level of subjectivity that television rarely acknowledges. Because of this, fingerprint analysis is not immune to human error. Studies and real-world reviews have shown that examiner bias can influence decisions, especially if contextual information about a case is known beforehand. This is why modern forensic procedures often emphasize verification and independent review to reduce the risk of confirmation bias. Another important limitation is what fingerprints can actually prove. A fingerprint can show that a person touched an object or was present in a location, but it cannot explain when that contact happened or what the person was doing at the time. It is a point of connection, not a complete narrative. In real investigations, fingerprints are rarely treated as standalone proof. Instead, they are used alongside other forms of evidence to help build a broader understanding of events. They are valuable, but they are not infallible, and they are not the instant solution that popular media often suggests. One of the biggest ideas shaped by true crime media is the image of the serial killer as a kind of criminal mastermind. They are often portrayed as highly intelligent, extremely strategic, and nearly impossible to catch without elite task forces or dramatic breakthroughs. In reality, serial homicide is extremely rare, accounting for a very small percentage of overall violent crime. Most homicide cases are not the result of long-term planning by highly organized individuals, but instead arise from situations like disputes, impulsive violence, or opportunistic acts. The idea of a widespread hidden epidemic of serial killers is largely a media-driven perception, rather than a reflection of statistical reality. The image of the brilliant, untouchable killer is also misleading. Many offenders in real cases do not operate with sophisticated planning or exceptional intelligence. In fact, long-term concealment of crimes is often more about circumstance, victim selection, and investigative limitations than intellectual superiority. Another common myth comes from modern surveillance portrayals, the idea that law enforcement has instant access to everything. In films, investigators can enhance blurry footage, scan global databases, track anyone in real time, and instantly identify suspects with a few clicks. The real system is far more fragmented. Law enforcement databases are designed primarily to store information on known individuals, such as those with prior arrests or convictions. There is no universal system that contains comprehensive data on the entire population, and there is certainly no single platform that can instantly identify an unknown suspect from scratch. Even advanced tools like facial recognition and digital tracking have significant limitations. They require usable data inputs, legal authorization, and careful verification before results can be acted on. They are support tools, not independent solutions. One of the most misunderstood modern techniques is forensic genetic genealogy. While it has been used to help solve cold cases by linking DNA profiles to relatives in public databases, the process is not automated or immediate. It involves extensive genealogical research, cross-referencing family trees, and significant manual investigative work. It is also subject to ongoing legal and privacy restrictions that vary by jurisdiction. Across all of these areas, whether it is surveillance, databases, or advanced forensic tools, the key reality is the same. Investigations are not driven by instant technological answers. They are built through layered work, human expertise, and the careful verification of evidence over time. When all myths are stripped away, what remains is a process that is far less cinematic, but far more methodical. Real investigations depend on coordination, patience, and the gradual assembly of facts into a coherent picture. There are no shortcuts, only structured work that moves step by step toward the truth. And while that may not match the speed or drama of fiction, it is exactly what makes real justice possible.